Hey entrepreneurs, executives, and spammers. We started the Pilot House email and customer retention team to crush targets. And in our 4th year, we are the best customer retention team in the Roman character set. We use campaigns to fire up the addresses you spent so much money to acquire and build effective automations that keep your engagement window fat and drive value that you can amortize over years. The cheapest customer is the customer you already have, and the most effective ad funnels go to high-intent audience. Come to pilothouse.co, fill out the lead form, and ask to speak with me directly. I'll give you a free audit. Back to the show.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Sometimes we stray off the beaten path on this pod, but I have something very interesting for today. 10 or 11 quotes from a few books on, I would say, advertising and psychology. Tested Advertising Methods, published 1932. Propaganda, published 1928. And The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, published 1895. We are governed. Our minds are molded. Our tastes are formed. Our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. I'm not sure if that's true. That's the discussion here. It's the world's best email retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time, I am joined by Avery Valerio, or Aves as we call her, the lead content manager at Pilot House, who has also recently launched an exciting new podcast, Adventurous, a brand and advertising-focused podcast. Avery, great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, I've listened to the podcast, but I don't think we've ever even been on like an all killer, no filler. So this is a first collab.
It was interesting the reason I got this pod, and I guess one of the reasons we started launching these additional pods was I would just get an idea and I'd go right and I'd just like barrel over Eric with it. I'd dump my idea out to the market, and he was just like, "Oh, you know what? You're kind of, I think you should just run your own show." And then, with the success of this pod, I assume Pilot House also said, "Hey, advertising, not channel specific, because this is a channel specific pod, and then DTC is very much advertising channel specific, to just carve it out and say, wait, let's just talk about not channel specific advertising in general. It's a space for us. I think it's a space out there." So why don't you really quickly tell us maybe your experience starting the pod, what you want to bring to it, etc.
Totally. Yeah, we're about 4 episodes in, and something that I really saw a blank space for is this idea that advertising is in a lot of ways an art form. And I don't think we think about it that way, because we think about, before we started recording, me and Jogo were talking about Mad Men and the fact that I've never watched it, but we think about like the Mad Men of the world, Don Draper, and that isn't always associated with art and culture, but good brand, good marketing comes from your ability to create art that teeters on culture, is sort of my hypothesis. So we're diving into a lot of really cool stories on the podcast. Last week, we launched one about Dalí, the surrealist artist, and how he actually designed the logo of the Chupa Chup lollipop, which is something that not a lot of people know, but it's really fun and interesting. So diving into things like that, where it's like, this is crossing over all of these different things, but it's technically still brand and marketing strategy, sometimes art.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know if you've launched that one yet. I haven't heard that one, although I did listen through and on your Got Milk pod. And so first of all, everybody here, if you haven't checked out Adventurous, go right now, subscribe to it. Great pod. There's some interesting stuff in there. I'll just lead in. I'd love for you to summarize your thoughts on the Got Milk again, and then I'll give you what I found surprising for it. But what was the summarize your Got Milk pod episode for us really quick?
Yeah, so Got Milk, I actually, really funny, like years ago said I'd like to do an episode of a podcast about Got Milk, and everyone was like, milk is so boring and so weird. And I was like, no, the story is so interesting. And so it was really years in the making, but that advertising campaign was the campaign that got me into advertising as a career. And the really interesting thing for me about Got Milk has always been that the milk mustaches that we all know was not the inception of that campaign. And I think that also what really excited me about Got Milk, and hopefully you found this too, Jordan, was like the way that they went about creating Got Milk was so interesting. I won't spoil too much of it, but when you really start thinking about milk, it's like nobody cares about milk. I mean, I had that personal experience of people being like, we don't care about milk. We don't want to hear you talking about milk. And it took like a lot of big brains to realize that for milk, the absence of the product was what was going to sell it, which is a phenomenal breakthrough and like a golden thread as an advertiser to pull at. And we also cover on the podcast, there's like a really fun, weird fact about the Transformers franchise. There's a crossover with those movies and Got Milk ads. You'll have to tune in to find out what it is. But the construction of the ad itself was one of those rare cases in advertising where they just got it right from the first go. Like the idea and the angle was so perfect that the like act of creating it for other people to take it in was easy. And they did it like first try, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, the thing that, I mean, I've of course seen the Got Milk ad, but the thing that really hit me when I listened to your pod was that it was actually, I mean, maybe it was a focus group or something. I don't know where the quote came from, but someone just says, I only notice milk when I don't have it. And like how this, how you can use consumer research to really inform your advertisement, because even just that insight's an important insight, but then how do you use that insight? And that's really where, like, I think really successful advertisers are able to do that. They're able to take that research and say, well, yes, so what? What do I do with that? And
Totally.
Got Milk was obviously a home run. How many times have I been like going down the grocery aisle and I'll grab milk and I'll just say, got milk? Like,
Yeah, the spin-offs that it made too. Like people just started using like got blank for everything. And yeah, I feel like something I talked about a lot in the pod and I talk about all the time is like those guys, Goodby and Silverstein, had to run that focus group. You have a focus group at your fingertips, whether it be like your own comment section or reviews on a website. Like we are so spoiled now as advertisers. We've got like those golden threads everywhere and you just have to start pulling at them.
There are a ton of ads that I've already discussed in the channel that I won't bring up again, although I'd love to chat with them with you. I don't want to bore my audience if they listen to all the episodes. But one I haven't, I don't think I've discussed this. Maybe I have. But whatever. It's just The Taste of a New Generation. And why that one was interesting was because it's Pepsi and it turned Coca-Cola's name against them. Coke Classic. Oh, well, this is the taste of a new generation. Right? Like, how do you take your main competitor's name and turn it into a downside? How do you take their whole selling proposition and turn it against them? Right? Like, wow. But yeah. So really cool to talk about some cool ads. I always find them exciting. But I have something very interesting for today. I've got 10 or 11 quotes from a few books on, I would say, advertising and psychology. By the way, audience, if you are interested, you can always go back to the World's Best Email Retention Podcast, episode 22, where I discuss cognitive biases. Because obviously, understanding cognitive biases is a precursor to understanding trends in consumer psychology. But I have some of these quotes, and sometimes we stray off the beaten path on this pod, so some of this stuff might be a little interesting. The books I was looking through, Tested Advertising Methods, published 1932, Propaganda, published 1928, and The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, published 1895. And what I find interesting and what drew me to these older books was a lot of this came out of the French Revolution, because, the aristocracy, or what was left of it, were like, how'd everything get so cray? Right?
Yeah, totally.
And they started thinking about how do people's minds work. And that's what I find the most fascinating about advertising, how people's minds work and how that causes them to purchase. So what I suggest we do is I'm going to just start with the simple ones, and then the weird ones are later on. So stick around for the weird ones. I'm going to read the quote, and just Abe's, you can either say, I don't really care about it, we'll just skip it. But if you want to tug on that one, just say whether you think it's important, relatively important, or relatively unimportant. I mean, you're actually doing this advertising all the time. Some of this stuff is more than 100 years old. So maybe it just actually doesn't really matter. Don't know. You've got the practical knowledge, and for me, I mean, this is a great chance for me to have someone with practical knowledge confirm some of the things that I study myself in advertising.
Cool. Yeah.
First one, don't try to be clever. Be clear. Clarity sells.
Love that. Yeah. I do recommend people, especially on like social platforms, that you keep your language as simple as possible. I'm a big fan of Occam's razor. The easiest way to communicate something to someone is going to work the best. And that one I think is so funny that it would have been so old, because nowadays you're dealing with like a negative attention span when you're putting ads together. So the clearest way is always, I think, the most successful.
Yeah, I mean, I this one resonated for me because I did like power subject line testing earlier in my career, right? And my discovery was like, don't get cute, right? Just tell them what's in it for them. As simple as possible, right?
What is the value that it's bringing to their lives? No need for like a limerick in your, in your subject line. Just keep it normal, keep it easy to read. It's all good.
Yeah. Okay. Specific claims are more believable than general ones.
Yeah, I would say that one is also more important now than ever. You know, you can easily say everyone loves this new product, but if you can say, here's a picture of her, and Tammy from Minnesota said that this product has improved her daily life, that is obviously going to work a lot better, because we're dealing with so much misinformation all the time that something tangible and specific feels real.
I mean, that's actually like, it's almost like CGC itself is a manifestation of what I suppose is a truth in advertising, right? Because it's like, oh, it's actually not even mass market, it's a specific person. You can't get any less mass market than a specific person telling you, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, cool. I use these things to myself, like in the World's Best Email Retention podcast, I'm being really specific about this is the world's best. And also I say in my sales process that, you know, we are the best customer retention team in the Roman character set, which is like this oddly specific thing, right? Although, audience, it's true. All this is true. This is the world's best email retention podcast. And I will take on any retention agency that deals in Spanish or French. If they work on the Chinese character set, I don't know. I'm out on that one. So it's all true, but I use that, right? I try to use these things. This is interesting. I find this one fascinating. I can't wait to see how you think about this one. The special characteristic of prestige is to prevent us from seeing things as they are.
This one, again, it's from applying it to where we are in the current cultural landscape, is really interesting to me when we think about the difference between a content creator and an influencer, because I think that influencers carry this mirage for prestige, to be kind to them, that people have really started reacting negatively towards. And I feel like that also puts me on a road of thinking about, there's this, I don't know if you'd be familiar with them, they're a brand in the beauty space called The Ordinary, and they've recently done something really interesting, which is they were at their store, they sell skincare, hair care, but all of their products are quite stripped back and affordable. And so they've started selling eggs. Well, they did for a very brief moment for very cheap in a store in Manhattan, because the beauty industry especially creates a lot of prestige and there's a lot of markup on their products. And so The Ordinary said, that's not our gambit. We know that times are tough right now. So not only are we offering you a beauty product at a price that is affordable, and we're taking ourselves out of that game of prestige that is often not very real, but we're also selling something that you need in your everyday life for cheaper than you can get it at the grocery store for this limited time. And then they also did a separate campaign in that same store, I believe, where they had a pile of money and they were including cash with people's purchases in store, because they were, the campaign was kind of like, we could have paid this money to an influencer to promote these products, and we could have, paid millions of dollars to Kim Kardashian to use The Ordinary on her hair, but instead we're giving you guys the money back because these products are simple. They're not fancy, which is huge in that industry. The packaging isn't that cool or exciting, but they work. They work really well. So they've removed themselves from this place of prestige, to use that same word, and given people something that's real and actively getting results. And then the way they reflect that in those marketing cases, I think is so interesting.
They're even called The Ordinary.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Well, and just something that came to mind when you gave your response. I mean, obviously, I thought about this and I thought about Gucci and things like that, right? And that's, because you can go and buy the exact same bag as a knockoff and pay, a quarter the price. And it was made in the same factory. It's the same bag. So, yeah, the prestige prevents us from seeing things how they are. But it's interesting that you I had this, I mean, not negative. Your take was more negative, right? And so, interestingly, like, do you think that, I follow Ralph Lauren really closely. Don't own any of their clothes. I just follow them as a marketer very closely, right? And what they're doing. I think it's just like a classic American brand. And so, like, do you just actually think that trying to make yourself a luxury brand is just a bad idea now?
I think it is very difficult now. And I think there are certain instances where maybe you're a celebrity-backed brand. But a lot of those brands they're big and they're bloated. And there is, I think, actively a shift in our culture where people are really moving away from that. I think, obviously, like you just mentioned it, Jogo, it's the same bag made in the same factory. People have just physically seen that. And so the fallout in the next few years is going to be really interesting, where it's like, what are the results that I'm getting? Who's making this? Like, I'm so interested in the craftsmanship of the product I'm buying rather than the name. And I think there's always going to be a subset of people who, in my opinion, are a little insecure, who are like, I need that Gucci tag on this bag to prove something to others that I should just be proving within myself. But I think there is a big shift in a lot of different verticals where people are moving more towards a brand like The Ordinary that is actually just making something that's good and offering it at a reasonable price.
Where's the beef, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, next one. They're going to progressively start getting more complex. Okay, we went through all the simple ones. By playing upon an old cliche or manipulating a new one, the marketer can sometimes swing a whole mass group's emotions. I'll read it again. By playing upon an old cliche or manipulating a new one, the marketer can sometimes swing a whole mass groups of emotions.
That one is interesting, and I feel like borderline familiar. I definitely don't think your audience knows this, or you, Jogo, but my background is in political strategy and communications. So I lived in impacting mass.
Lots of this is going to sound familiar to you. You probably read some of these books in school.
Yeah, so that's my background, and I think that what I appreciate about this might be like kind of a rogue direction to take this, but what I appreciate about marketing is that the products that I'm marketing aren't going to be for everyone. And so there is a lot of value as a marketer in knowing when to niche down. And I see a lot of brands come through, because you and I both work on the sales side. We probably both see this a lot, where someone comes in and they're like, I want every person in the United States of America to love and know this brand. And that's not going to happen unless you're jumping in a time machine, starting things way back when. So I think that what that brings to my mind is like the art of niching down and how to feel comfortable with not persuading a huge cultural or mindset shift in a large number of people, and rather being comfortable and confident in like, okay, this product is maybe for not everyone in the United States, but men 35 to 45 who work in this industry, and starting there is so valuable to learn as a brand. And you won't waste all this time thinking that you can achieve that sort of mass shift. So different direction, but like it reminded me of why I love marketing, and I don't want to just convince people who to vote for.
There was this show a long time ago. I mean, I was a super, super small kid, so it's obviously an ancient show. And it was called Dinosaurs, and it was a puppet show, basically, right? It's kind of like Alf, that whole period, after the Muppets blew up. And one of the funny things on this show, this is so unrelated to anything we're talking about now, but like their play on advertising. So when you think back to these kind of old 50s videos where it's like, try cornflakes, and the kids like pour the cornflakes in, right? You know, and there's like 3 different brands of cereal. They were making fun of that to another degree because they didn't actually have brands, they just had the product, but they still had commercials. So they do this commercial or whatever, this show or whatever, and they'd say, brought to you by beer. And then they would just talk about what beer is, and beer was the whole brand and there was no competitor, but they still had the mass market advertising. And point being, it's like, yeah, how could everybody in the country be into your product? How could you even differentiate yourself? Like, how could you... How would you need to advertise that?
Totally.
Right? It's like there's beer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about like years and years ago, if we're talking about the 50s, the lack of choice, and fast forward to now where it's like everyone is starting an e-commerce business. It's so easy. So cereal is a really good one, where there used to be a set number of cereal boxes on the shelves when you went to the grocery store, and now it's like, if I don't eat animal-based products and I also want something that tastes like Fruity Pebbles with marshmallows in it, chances are there's like an e-commerce business that someone set up for that exact thing. So the idea that you can have this
hyper
really
niche,
big like size of the prize, and you're going after all the kids in America with your Fruity Pebbles cereal, is just like a myth of the past at this point, because people have so much choice now.
This also touches on like my own theories on how mass market advertising works. I think for mass market advertising to be truly effective, you need to have unobservable word of mouth impressions. So like in the buyer space, you've got your impressions, right? You got your click-through rate. And then, you know, when an ad works well, you get this improved click-through rate. Okay, yeah, well, that may be like an unexplained improved click-through rate. Why did that click-through rate start going up? Well, if you've niched down enough that you start getting unobservable word-of-mouth impressions, people, you know, the water cooler effect, the halo effect, right? That's all stuff that happens out of funnel. And if you don't have that stuff happening out of funnel, like if you, let's say you niche down and you get 50% more impressions for free, they're unobservable word-of-mouth impressions. Well, if you don't have that, then you have to buy an extra 50% impressions. And the next guy who's niched down, the next guy or girl who's niched down, is going to just crush because they've got those free impressions, right? And so their brand will become more popular. Wow, we've strayed quite a bit from the list.
Yeah. But like that was like bound to happen. Like both of our reputations at House. We're bound to take these old quotes from, some of them are like from the 1800s, and just run wild.
To close this one off, I'll just say, like, playing upon an old cliche. I forget which one this one. Oh, this must have been from the 1932 one. Is like play on existing beliefs, and like, you know, there are people's preconceived. This is more gets used in the political realm than the advertising realm. But there are people who believe things. So just, okay, if they believe that, just piggyback on top of that, right? You know, you don't need to. You just, this is what they believe. And so obviously that can be used in advertisement too. If people believe something kind of tangential, just leverage that, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think too, like a last thought from my end is like how important it is to be aware of culture. Like the statement before that I made, where I think people are moving away from those luxury name brands. Being aware of that is easy, because if you know that a lot of people believe that right now, then you can very easily make an ad right now if you are a warehouse in China and just say, look at this, we made the bag. And that's going to work at this particular moment in time because, you know, people are already on that bandwagon. You can just easily hop on. Or maybe, I guess that's not a good analogy. Ride beside the bandwagon and sell your wares to the bandwagon.
Sail with the same wind. That's how I say that one, right?
That's a good one.
Sail with the same wind. Okay, next one. Crowds are only to be influenced by ideas that are absolute, uncompromising, and simple. Do you think that's true?
I don't think that one's true anymore. I think the way that we have all become used to absorbing information online means that it's funny because I was saying earlier the truth is more important than ever, but you can now construct and own a narrative. I'm not saying like go on the internet and lie, but I'm just saying that we're in a very different space now, especially this is making me think of like AI imagery and using images of your product that haven't ever really existed. It's like a really interesting time when we start to think about like what is real and factual, because those aren't the things that move the needle in people's minds, as we've seen.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like feelings are so much more important to people these days than they ever have been. So being able to have a brand that taps into an emotion rather than a actual fact about a person's life is actually more beneficial.
I've got a very similar quote coming up on that one. So put a pin in that because we're going to get to that.
Nice.
Although let me also add though on something you'd said there on AI. One of the interesting things I face in just, starting to use more products is that like just simple, I would say consumer regulation. Like if you have the AI has to pull a product image from your catalog that is actually that product. If it's a variation, well then technically that's a bait and switch. So if the AI doesn't draw the shoe with the exact same straps, then you're not buying that shoe, right? And so there's in the weeds, there's this vector stuff that the mathematicians do. There's this vector stuff, I've looked into it, where you can assign and say, pull this image from this catalog. But if it's not doing that, then you can't really use it. So the AI gets used a lot for what you were saying is like, you can use it for more lifestyle stuff, right? But the second you're showing that product, it does screw up our industry. And as that gets tackled, that'll be the singularity for advertising. When it's like, when you've got Joe Rogan wearing those shoes, and it's those shoes, right? It's going to be an explosion.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time. It's, I'm excited to see how it all goes. Interested is a better word. I'm very interested to see what happens.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you know about this. There's this moment on TikTok Shop where a bunch of people were buying a mug that they'd seen images of that was like a geode mug. And then people started getting them. It was from just like a drop shipper TikTok Shop account. And the mug looked so bad compared to the images that were all AI that everyone had seen of this product. And it was like the first major instance, I think, of a dropshipper being able to really take advantage of an AI rendering, going crazy with it. And then as soon as word of mouth got out there and people started posting, hey, this thing looks like crap.
And that's so if you're shipping from the US, then you fall under all kinds of laws that's a bait and switch. You're lying to consumers. But of course, if that's getting shipped from China or whatever,
exactly,
buyer beware. Okay, next one. Ready? People in a mass market audience are more suggestible than individuals acting alone. Create a sense of shared purpose or urgency through media.
This one is really interesting. It's making me think because I just recorded an episode of Adventurous and I was leaning on some of my past knowledge. I'll maybe just retell the same thing. So when I used to go in and I'd start working with a political candidate, before I wanted to write like speeches for them at scale, I would go door to door with that person to see what they were like when they interacted with a person one-on-one on the doorstep. I'm sure you either have avoided a politician on your doorstep or you've talked to one, so you know what I'm talking about. But I'd watch and I would observe that because that is really hard to do, to get into someone's front door, they open it and say, hey, my name's Jogo. Will you vote for me? No? Why? Is much more difficult than writing a speech that is exciting, empowering. They get up on the stage. If it's well crafted, they deliver it. Everyone's really excited because everyone has this shared purpose. I feel like that was a good phrase of like, we're all pulling in this one direction. But when you come down to an individual, there's always a freedom to push back on things, even if they were supportive, which is really interesting to observe very directly.
The thing I think about when you say that is that when it's with the individual, it's like, this has to be for me. This is for me. I'm the one in the door. He or she's talking to me. Whereas the speech is, oh, this could be for me. Like, it's not specifically for me, but it could be. I've got an option to be part of this if I want to. And that is a very real difference by the way, in the way that email advertising works versus advertising and platform. An email is for you. It went to your email address. It should be correct, right? Hey, that's not what I ordered. You know what I mean? And obviously, like, if you see an email that speaks to you as if you are a repeat customer and you've never bought, or the reverse. If you're a repeat customer and you get an email that assumes you've never bought, you think, what the hell's up with these guys? How do they not know these simple things about me? You're offended. Whereas if you see an ad that's like, even though the ad was targeted to you by platforms, by algorithms, it was targeted to you. There's no expectation that it be for you. And if it's not for you, you just keep scrolling. And that's similar to that speech and that crowd.
Yeah, it's the exact same. It goes from like when you're on platform, it's like this is, or in a crowd watching a speech, this is like for us. There's a real collective. Like this is for a demographic, and you're aware of that. But you're totally right. It's like the most effective emails for me are like, hey, Aves, we noticed you buy a lot of stuff from here, and we're having a sale. You're a VIP. There you go. Or
you're speaking to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, I do buy a lot of stuff here. Thanks for noticing. Perfect. And I love that you're also sending recommendations for new stuff. So I think that's a really good comp where it's like, it's a collective, it's for us. It's like, this is just for a larger group. And it's a really easy barrier to entry when you're just on Meta or
also
TikTok
frequency too. Like we do in our industry in email, we get pushed to send a lot of emails. You know what I mean? Like everybody contacts us, hey, can you send another email? But frequency, it's like, hey, this is the frequency you chose for me. Why are you emailing me 4 times a week? You chose this frequency for me. You know exactly who I am. So, okay, next one. This one's a bit longer. I'll read it twice for the audience to make sure that they get it. I'm sure you'll consume it in the first go. Appeal to subconscious desires, such as the need for status, freedom, or belonging, by linking products, ideas, or causes to symbolic representations of these desires. One can create compelling motivations for action. I'm going to read that one again. Appeal to subconscious desires, such as the need for status, freedom, or belonging. By linking products, ideas, or causes to symbolic representations of these desires, one can create compelling motivations for action.
Very timely. So we just released it this week. I've been thinking about it a lot, but last week we did an episode of Adventurous about, it was a really probably 20 minutes of me ranting about the surrealist art movement. And so have been thinking a lot about the subconscious and how it plays into advertising. And the story there, won't spoil it too much if you want to listen to it, but was that Salvador Dalí actually designed a logo for a lollipop. And the interesting thing, number one, I like to point out, he did not do this at the beginning of his career. He was a very famous, prominent artist, and he was just friends with the Chupa Chup guy. But the design of the logo, we'll get into it more on Adventurous, it is a little daisy. And so how these lollipops are presented, and I'm sure we can link it in the description as well, is they're typically on a stand where it looks like a bouquet of flowers. So when Dalí enclosed an existing name logo in a daisy, it meant that every time you look at that display in a gas station, which is usually where they are, they're colorful, they're bright, they look like a bouquet of flowers. Subconsciously, that means, different things to different people. But for me, I was saying on the podcast, it really lends itself to like a field of flowers. And you think about being a kid, summertime, running around in that field of flowers. And that is such a long-term, subconscious only play that someone who is a trained surrealist artist made for a candy company, which is crazy. But it's obviously worked because they've been around since 1958. And think about how many candy companies there are and have started since then. But yeah,
and how few of the customers knew it was Dalí. It was just that good.
Yeah, it's just a lollipop logo that you probably, if you don't stop and think about it either, think much about. But it's so intentional. It's always placed on the top of the lollipop as well, so it's fully visible. And yeah, like I said, it looks so similar to a bouquet of flowers when it's presented as it is intended. And yeah, I love talking about the subconscious mind. I could talk about it for hours and how it impacts marketing and how you think about your consumers. You can't obviously know. We're not all therapists. So I think I made that point. I'm not a therapist. got them in the family. They're not like super fun to be at a party with, but they do a lot of interesting thinking that's almost on the opposite end of the spectrum of those when we're thinking about the subconscious mind. Because we think, how do we get in there and manipulate it almost? And they're wondering, just how do I figure out people's motivations?
Yeah, I mean, we're a kind of psychiatrist. It works like this. Oh, whatever the solution to your problems is to purchase.
Yeah, exactly. I think I did say that. Unfortunately, what we do is we try to figure out what your subconscious fears are and then sell you something that will make you feel a little bit more at ease. But yeah, I think there's tons of different ways to like utilize every tool in the ad tool belt these days to harken back to that like surrealist era of really thinking about what is going on in someone's subconscious brain and how do we take a hold of that and make them buy something.
Part of this is linked in a way to conditioning, and like I've got my own kind of model for how I think mass market advertising works. Condition, connect, and conceptualize. Maybe, I've never discussed it on the pod because this is an email retention pod. Maybe someday I can come on Adventurous to discuss my model. But one of the ways that this ties in, think about Budweiser for a second, okay? Every Bud Light ad, it's always, I've noticed this, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you can find an example, but like most of the time, it's people in their backyard, right? They're conditioning you to think, you're going over to sit in your buddy Paul's backyard. Oh, better get some Bud Light. I'm going to the backyard. It's that conditioning. And so like in my mind, I mean, I'm sure that at massive brands, I'm sure they're having these kinds of discussions all the time, these core carnal psychological discussions. And I'm sure they're like, look, we're going to make the backyard a symbol for like the all-American place. There's if there's nothing more American than being in the backyard and frying burgers on the barbecue, right? Make that symbol, right? And then so I think there's one of two things are happening. Either one, you're making your product a symbol for that larger idea. There's nothing more American than this. Oh, well, that's the same as Bud Light. Or just putting your product inside of that greater thing, right? So either your product is the symbol or your product is just referenced by that symbol. Maybe those two are the same thing. I don't know if there's a difference. But point being, this symbolic representation, it's like the exciting thing at the very highest level of advertising, which I'll never do, I'm sure, is like, what are the symbols that we are trying to get into people's minds to associate them with our brand? And that's the most fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you have a lot more space and time to think about it. I was prepping an episode on like the automotive industry and car commercials, and that is a great example of those are like fundamentally so top of funnel. Like no one's ever gonna see an ad and immediately go, I'm buying a Porsche. But it's like this long-term game of constant conditioning to an audience where it's like, you see like a Porsche versus like an Audi SUV. You're going to see in those Audi commercials like a family getting in. They're kind of an upscale family, but it fits everyone, and we're going to these different things, and we like pulling up to the office in it as well. It's multi-use versus like a Porsche is just like one singular person, and they're driving down the coast, and it's freedom. It's like an exciting adventure that they get to go on. And I feel like those guys probably constantly think about like the backdrop, the person driving the car. What are all these things subconsciously signaling over time?
In luxury car ads, there's always never a car in front of you, right? You're always going really fast on a winding mountain. And because what's the reality for that person? That person's probably really busy. To drive a luxury car, you have, you're either born rich or you've got like crazy responsibilities. So their escape is just, oh my God, let me get the hell out of this city. Here I am on this winding road, complete opposite of reality. Whereas for the kind of, look, I drive a Crosstrek. I've had my Crosstrek for a long time. I used to do rock climbing. So I saw the ads and it's like they had all the ropes in the back of the car. Now I've got two boys. But all the rope, they're speaking to me, right? It totally worked. The advertising totally worked. But if you look at the kind of lower price point cars that are being driven by, I guess, just younger consumers who are earlier in their careers, Yeah, it's always shots of them in the city. Because here's what they're thinking. They haven't got their first car yet. And they're like, oh my God, if I could just get this chair over to Brad's place. And so the commercial is just, here's the chair. Taking the chair out and bringing it up Brad's stairs. Complete opposite of reality. Because right now you're carrying that chair to Brad's place.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I love the ones too where it's like a ton of people get into the sort of lower price range cars and like go out to dinner. Like the dream is like, well, maybe I can fit all my friends and we won't all have to take the subway to go to that birthday party.
Totally.
It's very like, and like you said, there's always the like luxury cars are selling you something different. I think it's also interesting to think about like luxury outdoor brands. I think about these guys a lot, like an Arc'teryx in the world of tech. I feel like this is really going to get us off topic, but I recently saw a piece of art that was the hypothesis of the piece of art was that power dressing is much different today than it used to be. So it was a Patagonia vest, which is a
Patagucci.
Patagonia vest, but it was made out of Margaret Thatcher's scarves that she used to wear. So this connection between Margaret Thatcher always had these very nice designer scarves as like an ascot. And so that was her form of power dressing. We don't have to get into Margaret Thatcher on the pod, but that was her form of power dressing. And then you apply it to something recent, which is the boom in tech. We're all putting on these, you and I are probably guilty of it, like wearing Arc'teryx because that is the new, like very nice cut suit that you would have previously worn to the office in the Dawn Draper days. Now I put on my Arc'teryx pants and that is a way to signal power. In the world, which is so, interesting on a subconscious level how that shifts too. And like tracking that is so important. If you're still selling the little scarves, it's outdated. It's not how people are signaling power.
I used to sell suits online. Indochino, it's a custom tailored men's suit based in Vancouver. Got a closet full of Indochinos. Not all of them fit anymore. I was a younger man. But it's interesting when I watch their advertising because I check out their 1 minute spots that you see on YouTube and things like that. Because of course we were discussing, like I follow very closely what Ralph Lauren does, and Ralph Lauren will do like these, the same ad would be like a couple doing like not a tango, but like a dance on the rooftop of some New York building, right? And they're just having a glass of wine and they're just feeling so moved and they get up and just dance together and it's black and white, right? It's a wealthier consumer they're going for. And the interesting thing about the Indochino stuff is they, in their ads, they'll actually have, I don't know how else to say it, but like kind of electronic, like type rave type dancing. What I mean? I don't even know what the word for it is anymore. I'm so old. But like, it's like young people to like, rather vigorous electronic music dancing in like totally crazy scenes, like palm trees. Like I live in Mexico, stuff that I would see on the beach in Mexico, which is like travel, right? Which is aspirational, right?
I feel like we were just talking about, it's like, there's different ways, like you've had to shift if you're selling suits. I was actually recently talking to a brand and I was thinking about my coworkers and also my own partner he's a data scientist, but he works fully remote. And so he does not, like if he had the job that he has now 15 years ago, he would have been required to wear a suit every single day. But instead he's wearing like Lululemon shorts and a cool t-shirt we got when we were in Nashville, and that's fine. So there's like retailers of what we now consider almost like outdated dress for the workplace have had to really shift their subconscious signaling.
Before this pod, I had to cancel a pod with Evan because my computer was dead, technical problems. But the funny thing before that pod was we were both rooting through both of our places looking for our podcast hat. Where's my podcast hat? That's the work. I mean, I wore my Dawn Draper shirt today, so I didn't wear a hat. Yeah. Also, I think my boys are burying my hats out is what I think is happening. I don't know.
Like outside?
I don't know what's happening to all my hats, and I assume the boys are destroying them somehow.
It probably has something to do with them, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we did discuss symbolic representations of freedom and status there. We didn't get into belonging, but let's move on. We're almost done here. Here's another long one. Again, I said the crazy stuff was at the end. So crowds turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduces them. Affirmation, pure and simple, kept free of reasoning and all proof, is one of the surest means of making an idea enter the minds of crowds. Want me to read that one again?
You can if you want. I mean, I feel like that's probably something I've heard.
I'll read it again.
Yeah.
Crowds, for the audience, I didn't realize you were a political scientist. Crowds turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduces them. Affirmation, pure and simple, kept free of reasoning and all proof, is one of the surest means of making an idea enter the minds of crowds.
That one's a big one. And I think it's like tough not to think of my past lives with that one. Where it's like, I know you've talked before about cognitive bias a lot on this podcast, so poor people, but it's sort of like, if I think something and I believe it and it's rooted in me, I'm not changing that. And that lesson is so important when you are working in the realm of political strategy, because it's like, there are people based on data, it's kind of the word I did, there are people based on data that's aggregated across like, what's the grocery store that you shop at? How much do you make? What clothing brand do you wear? There are people who are easier to sway, but it's like, if you can really connect to a group of people that feel strongly about something and just say like, yeah, we also feel strongly about that, that is the way to really communicate with the masses.
Amazing. How do you do that? How do you work your ad to connect with those people and just ignore the rest because they're a tough sell with a high cost per click anyway?
Mm-hmm. A great example of this is a brand that I personally still work with. I love working with some of our kind of high skill brands at Pilot House, but I talked the client into letting me create some content around what was going on politically in the States. And this was a few weeks ago, actually. It's more like just 1 month. But the timeline's not that important because things change all the time. But I was like, I know deep down we might have there's going to be people in every camp, in every customer base. Where I was like, I know that doing this and not picking a side, but simply acknowledging the bullshit, the craziness is going to have such an impact on the people that buy this product. And that's exactly what happened. I think on a previous note, we were talking about like word of mouth. What happened was these ads that we're making, which were really like sort of scrappy. They felt like they were in fact sometimes filmed in a warehouse. Like we're using a lot of like humanized footage with this really fun take on just like things are crazy, buy this product. Or even just acknowledging that things were crazy. And it was a little bit of a risk. Like I said, we weren't like putting a flag in either camp, but it was just like the acknowledgement of like, your guys' eggs are costing $15. That sucks. You're gonna have to stay in more. This is a product that is nice to use when you're staying in. Like that kind of messaging was so effective, which was really interesting because a month ago we were at a time where everyone was like, should I buy stuff? Am I going to have money? Am I going to be able to buy something in a month? It was a really difficult time for a lot of brands, but we saw a lot of success through, like I said, just acknowledging it and being really playful. And that was because I knew that messaging would affirm what at least like 75% of our core base was already thinking and feeling.
Yeah, there's this, it's from the cognitive bias episode where I talked about like, I mean, obviously we all just think we're right all the time. We all think our shit don't stink. That's just what we all think. And just telling someone, you're right. You know? Mm-hmm. Oh, you know that whatever it is, you're right. I go into a big thing. I had Abby on the pod. I won't repeat it for the audience, but I went into a big thing of that where like the advertisements I feel that work are like, show the person like as close as you can to them. In my example, it was like a mom in a house, right? Just show the closest representation to them. They see themselves, put them in the environment, where they are in their correct environment, and then put the product there. It's so dumb, but it's like, there I am. Oh, and I'm right. That's the environment that I like. Oh, I'm right. and then you just show them the product. I don't know if that works, but I have a suspicion
Feeling it
that
works, yeah. I'm currently reading a book. I believe it's called Perfection. I unfortunately can't remember who wrote it, but I'm reading a book to help research an episode that I'm going to do about the way that we advertise beauty to women, because there's been a very interesting shift, and some of it is because there's just more women marketers. But when you look at a beauty ad from the 50s, it was like, you are ugly and I hate everything about you, and here is a way to cover up everything you have going on. And now you look at beauty ads and it's like a celebration of different forms of beauty. And so it's so interesting, and I think it is like along the same path where it's like previously there were different working conditions, as I think they make apparent in Mad Men, but it's like now the constant messaging from beauty brands is like, you're perfect the way you are, girl, you'll just feel better with this. And we really moved away from, it's still like crazy, it's still subconsciously telling people you're not good enough, but the way that they present it is in this way that it's like, you're right, you're beautiful, you still need to do this $300 cream, whatever it is, but they lead with this like affirmation of what someone's already doing, which is so different than what was happening before.
They did this one in Mad Men. It was lipstick, and the ad that they went with, which they found the exact same thing. They came to the exact same conclusion. Don't just tell people they're ugly. It's not going to work. But their angle was mark your man, and it was actually like put the lipstick on, kiss your man. That man is yours. He's got your lipstick on, right? And so that was like, I mean, totally different angle. But the point is like, yeah, there's some angle to apply to the right psychology, which is the exact way earlier in this pod we were discussing. It's like, okay, there's what people think. Okay, so what? How are you going to use that? Right?
Yeah, totally.
So I pitched Mark Your Man to a prospect at some point recently.
I think we weren't recording yet, but I did disclose I've never seen Mad Men, so that's why we've got some Mad Men references going.
Oh my God, you have to watch. You work at an ad agency. You got to watch Mad Men. It's also great.
Mad Men.
Even if I first watched it before I worked at an ad agency. Okay, here we go. We are actually. I've got a note here on this one, this huge one, and this is something I wanted to share here. Is like when we talk about affirmation, pure and simple, kept free of reasoning and all proof. Of course, we did discuss for the believers, no evidence is necessary. For the non-believers, no evidence is enough. And that's just set, and it's not changing. I mean, there is some negotiation psychology around how you can change someone's mind, but it's very complicated, and it doesn't lend itself necessarily to advertising because it can't be single duplex communication. But also, truth in advertising failed. Right? They tried truth in advertising. It did not work. People do not want you to tell them the truth. They want to be in a little world. They want you to put them in that world, and they're happier there. And they actually just expect, and by the time they've gotten, so the way I see it is just put them in their world with the mass market advertising. No truth. Yeah, there's no cars in front of me. I'm just cruising through the windy mountains. And by the time you get to a point where, you need truth, you're at features and benefits way down the funnel, and you put them in that little world. So like my big point, truth in advertising sucks, didn't work. Don't even try.
It's boring. No one is interested in it. It's not exciting or nice to look at. Yeah. I think about like when you're saying that, like fragrance ads are always particularly exciting and interesting to me. It's like, yeah, you're in a ball gown running down the beach and you smell good. Has that ever happened to a human being? No, not in the history of the world.
Never. You're right.
Nobody's ever done that. But it's like,
falling with your leg stuff through the air, right?
You're like floating in a bubble, but you smell good. And you'll feel like you're floating in a bubble if you smell good. And people do like to be in that little world. Unrelated
to this tennis player who's got his own fragrance. I forget his name. Nadal? The French guy? I think it's Nadal. Yeah, it's interesting. At the end of every single match, the first thing he does is sit down and put his fragrance on. Like spray, spray, spray. First thing. And of course that's contractual. Of course contractually he has to do it, right? But that's just an interesting, I guess that's that is product placement, I guess, or it's sponsorship and because it's product placement because it's on TV. Mm-hmm. It's also him, I guess, what do you call it? Influencer sponsorship. Or is he an influencer? It's his scent.
It's his brand.
But yeah, he sprays 3 times every time, immediately after every match. right?
Love it. It becomes
Classic.
like a ritual that it's like, okay, well, I'll do that too. And then maybe I'll play tennis like a pro.
Yeah, well, yeah, totally.
My three
Or
spritzes.
just, he's who I aspire to be. By the way, I wear a fragrance, and before I go out, I spray it 3 times. And did I get that from him? Maybe. Okay, we're on our last one, and we are at 56 minutes. It's an hour-long power pod. My audience always gets the best. I put so much effort in here. I love you, audience. I bring great people on, and we really get into the nuts and bolts. And so hopefully there was something here that can inspire you at home to step outside the box with your advertisement. Not just, here's the thing I showed you last week, 20% off, but really connect emotionally, as Aves has discussed on her pod, with your audience. Do some features and benefits later on with email. Yeah, so last one, and then of course, don't forget to subscribe to Adventurous. I probably should have mentioned that a few more times over this pod.
It's too fun chatting about marketing to plug anything. Sometimes I've been doing that too. You get lost in the sauce.
So last one, and I'm not sure if it's true. I'm not sure if it's true. That's the discussion here. We are governed. Our minds are molded. Our tastes are formed. Our ideas suggested, largely by men we've never heard of. I'm not sure if that's true. Like, do we get everything? I mean, first of all, men or women, this is an older book. I mean, did I get more from my father, right? How much of what I'm going to purchase and really who I am, and of course who I am informs how you market to me. How much of that is carnal from the family? How much of that is molded from the propagandists who were, this is obviously from Propaganda, 1928. What do you think about that?
I do think it is still true. As someone who is a recently retired political strategist, I think that it is unfortunately still pretty true in a lot of ways. And I actually think it's more true now than it was. I really often think about, I was listening to a Joni Mitchell record yesterday. I think very highly of the 60s and 70s and the way that people used to really think freely. And I don't think we do as much of that as people did then. So I think that it has fluctuated in truthfulness as a statement as we've kind of gone along. And there have been eras where I think it's more true. I think we're in a point in time right now where it's pretty true, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think
Understood.
there's, so much even if we step out of the political space, if we just think about marketing and what we see and are fed, people are exposing themselves way more to those unnamed, and most of the time it probably still is men. We're handing them our attention by picking up our phone on a much more regular basis. We're kind of thinking back to Joni Mitchell. I think I referenced Joni Mitchell on my own podcast today too. But thinking back to that era of person, they weren't just staring at a box all day and getting
Your
information.
ex-formerly Twitter feed, right?
Yeah, exactly. They weren't living in these echo chambers that we've created for ourselves. They were going out, they were talking to people who had different opinions or the same, and then they were formulating their own opinions based on those conversations. Where now you sit in bed alone in the dark, scrolling through, and you have no one to kind of check the information that's coming into you. So it all kind of flips.
You would then, as an advertiser, you would kind of place less weighting on the importance of maybe beliefs, values that we would get from family and in school when we were young, and just assume that we're being a little bit steamrolled through the popular zeitgeist in our phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would hope as a human being that wasn't the case, but I think as an advertiser and a former political strategist, that is the case in a lot of ways. And I think there's spaces where it's not. We once, I don't think you were there, we once pitched a very big brand, and they were selling hosiery, women's undergarments and pantyhose. And that is a really interesting vertical because it has the potential to be a piece of lineage. And I think also I spoke in person at an event about a bag that I'd purchased because I had really vivid memories of my godmother when I was younger having this bag. And so those are purchases that were completely contingent on like my family environment, and I didn't even really like the bag. It was a Coach bag, and I talk mad smack about Coach. I don't think they're a good brand. I think their stuff is ugly. Like, I don't like it, but I had such a connection to like my godmother that I was thinking a lot about her. So I bought the bag. I don't even like it, but there are instances that I think are rare where people do make choices outside of sort of what they're being fed. But I think a lot of the times it's like, this is the new type of bag, or you see like positioning like from creators. It's like, okay, what is the sneaker of the summer? And then everyone is buying that sneaker. So I think there's, you know, as advertisers, we know that what is the sneaker of the summer? It's the sneaker that I sell is an angle that we create, and then we put it out there in mass, and people are like, everyone's buying the sneaker. I have to buy the sneaker, rather than maybe in the 70s, my friend has a pair of Converse and they're really comfortable and they've lasted a long time, so I'm going to get a pair of Converse. It's really shifted, I think.
Yeah. Now, there are ways to break free of the machine. So, for instance, you know, my family, we live part of our time outside Canada, expose our boys to other cultures, right? And, you know, just escape the monotony a bit. And let me tell you, audience, if you want to break free of the machine, what you want to do is come to pilothouse.co, sign out the lead form. We will help you break free of the machine by ramping and scaling your business to give you the freedom to live the life you want to live. So on that note, Aves, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was like an hour. So I'm so glad to have this much of your time, and perhaps at some point in the future we can have you on again.
Yeah, they'll have to come on mine. We'll just eventually they'll get shorter because we'll just go back and forth.
Because we'll have said it all.
In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.